Yo, what's up, y'all? It's Cone back here again today with another video. Today, we're going to be talking about the Portland Trailblazers, a team that people have been talking about a lot over the course of this past offseason and this season so far, especially today, because they just fired their general manager, Neil Olshey, for reasons regarding the code of conduct. There were reports an investigation kind of went into him recently because he reportedly created a toxic work environment, and clearly that was the case. So he has been fired, which is a good move for them as an organization. There's no room for that in any NBA front office at all, and just in a basketball sense, he's not done a very good job of improving this team as of recently. They continue to kind of run back the same roster with slight tweaks here and there, and nothing really ever changes. And that's kind of the same so far over the course of this season. And it continues to bring up the question, the more that the Trailblazers kind of remain in this middle of the pack area, when do they blow things up? When do the Trailblazers finally make the tough decision and maybe not even just blow it up, but look into it? Make the decision that, okay, maybe we have to look into this, consider Damian Lillard trades, start taking calls, and see what you can get for your pieces. They have good pieces. Even if they're not playing great basketball right now, Damian Lillard, who's kind of in a slump, we'll talk about that in a second, Jusuf Nurkic, CJ McCollum, Norman Powell, they've got solid players. Their contracts aren't phenomenal. Norman Powell is now being paid $90 million over the next 5 years, which teams might not look at that too fondly, but it's nothing crazy. Damian Lillard, despite struggling, is still an all-NBA caliber player. CJ is a borderline all-star guy. Jusuf Nurkic is a solid center. They can get things for these pieces. The door is still plenty open. Maybe they won't get as much as they might have gotten in this past offseason for some of those pieces, but the door is still very open for them to start rebuilding this thing. And I'm not the only one who thinks that it's time to look into that, because last time I uploaded a video like this, something very similar in the course of the offseason, where I said that going into the season, I think in the offseason, they should consider blowing it up. And Trailblazers fans got real mad at me saying that you're dumb, you don't know what you're talking about. So I did a Twitter poll before I recorded this video, and 90% of the people agreed with me that it's time for Portland to blow it up. The only people who really didn't agree were Portland Trailblazer fans. It seems like everyone can kind of see the way this is going. It doesn't feel like it's working. It reminds me kind of the Oklahoma City years from like when we got Melo and Paul George to when we traded Melo, and like just the Russ and Paul George years, where it felt like we were a solid team, but never really that great. We were never really a contender as much as I wanted to believe we were. We were never up on that upper echelon, and it resulted in us having to make the tough decision and trade not just Paul George, but our longtime face of the franchise, the best player in our franchise history, in Russell Westbrook. We had to make that tough decision. The Trailblazers feel like they're going in the same direction. They had that Western Conference Finals run, and that was great. That was a great run by them. But this past season, where they lost to the Denver Nuggets in very embarrassing fashion without some of their better players, this roster is just not good enough. They keep running back this roster of guys that can't really defend, and if Dame isn't carrying them, they're just not winning a lot of games. Dame hasn't been great this season, and they are 11-12, so that is something, if you're a Trailblazer fan, you can kind of look at and go, okay, well, if Dame's not playing that great, and we're still 11-12, like there is still some stuff to kind of look at. But Dame's injured now. He's been playing injured most of the season, maybe even all of the season. It seems like he talked about how he's still been dealing with that abdominal injury, I believe it is, since the Olympics. He's now out with that for, I believe it's like 10 games or so, or maybe just 10 days. But Dame's out right now. They lost by 30 to the Spurs last night, and it just feels like they're stuck. Firing Neil Olshey feels like a chance to just bring in a new general manager and have the general manager go, okay, I'm going to clean house. Let's talk about a little bit about the Trailblazers, how they look so far this season. Like I said, 11-12 record. They are 10-2 at home, which is amazing, and they're 1-10 away. So they suck on the road. They just can't seem to win outside of Portland, Oregon, it seems like. That's ridiculous. That is an abysmal difference between home and away. The home record's great, sure, but if you can't win a road game, it doesn't matter. And it kind of just goes to show that things aren't working at the moment. If we go back and look at their offseason moves, because like I said, the last time I made one of these videos talking about the Portland Trailblazers was in the offseason, where I talked about how it's probably time for them to kind of consider a reset. Now, they've made a bunch of moves, and so let's kind of talk about how those moves have looked so far. Norman Powell, 5 years, $90 million deal. He's been fine. He's averaging right around the same amount of points, around the 17-ish points that he had over the course of his time in Portland at the end of last season when they got him from the Raptors. He's doing it more efficiently, so he's been fine. He's not a very good defender, which is this team's big issue, but we'll talk about that in a second. Ben McLemore, 1 year minimum, hasn't had a ton of run. Neither has Tony Snell. Cody Zeller's been fine. Those were their big pickups. In an offseason where it was critical for them to get things right, they brought Norman Powell back, brought in Ben McLemore, Tony Snell, and Cody Zeller. So that kind of shows you just how tapped out this team is, how stuck they are, how they're just not able to really make a lot of impactful pieces come to the roster. They're not able to make a lot of moves. Now, they did pick up Larry Nance Jr. in a trade. He was a piece I liked. I liked that move a lot. I thought Larry Nance Jr. was someone that could help this team, and he has been solid. He's played some really good basketball, but really the reason why they traded for him is to grab some defense. They needed defense desperately, and Larry Nance Jr. provides that, and it hasn't helped. They've still been an abysmal defensive team. If we look at team stats, they are the third worst defensive rating in the NBA. The only two that are worse than them are the New Orleans Pelicans and the Memphis Grizzlies. The Pelicans are 6-18, and the Memphis Grizzlies just can't stop anyone. So that's where they're at right now, and that is terrible. That's awful. They can't stop anyone. And Chauncey Billups came in and said what he wanted to do was give this team a defensive identity. And when you're the third worst offense in the league, you can't have a defensive identity. If this is what your defensive identity looks like, that's a big problem. Chauncey Billups said over the course of this past, I think it was yesterday, after they lost to the San Antonio Spurs, he said their job is to come in every game and get better and compete. And he doesn't think they're doing that. He doesn't think they're getting better every night. And I can't disagree with him. This Portland team looks lost. I've talked about their defense a lot, but that's been the big issue. They've never been able to get any stops. Damian Lillard scored 60 points in a playoff game this past year, and they lost because they couldn't stop anyone. Not just Nikola Jokic, like nobody on that team, a team without Jamal Murray, they couldn't stop them. And not only that, but without most of their top guards, it's bad in Portland. So the reason why they need to make this decision kind of relatively soon, in my opinion, is because your trade assets are dwindling. You've got Damian Lillard. He is a phenomenal, still an all-NBA player. He's doing with that injury, and I do think he is going to bounce back. He's not going to keep up the numbers that he's been putting up, but this is his worst season since 2014. At the moment, he's averaging 21 points per game. He's shooting 40% from the field, 30% from three. He does have 8 assists per game, so he's doing great as a playmaker. That is his second highest career total, which is incredible for him. Awesome. But the efficiency drop is scary for a team that, if they do decide to rebuild, he is the guy that is going to get them the big pieces to start that rebuild. Whether it's like 3-4 first-round picks, a young player, salary filler, he's the guy that's going to get that for them. And so they need to start thinking about, what if this injury is big and Dame is starting to decline? I don't think it's unrealistic to say that his best years might be past him. I'm not saying he's not an incredible player, but I don't know if he's going to go back to averaging 30 points per game. It's just a tough ask with how physical the NBA is right now, that injury that he's dealing with. I don't think it's realistic to ask him to go back to around 30 points per game. So his trade value is slowly falling the older he gets. So you don't want that to happen. You have to start considering taking calls on Damian Lillard. CJ McCollum is another big one. He is your second biggest trade piece. And right now he's averaging 20.4 points per game, which is his lowest since 2014. Since he had his breakout year, this is his lowest total, shooting only 42.6% from the field. Now he is shooting 39.6% from three, which is pretty solid. 4.3 rebounds, 4.4 assists. He's not having a terrible year by any means. Of course, he should probably be more efficient. You would like to see that, but he's not having a bad year. The problem is it's a down year. CJ McCollum had a great season last year. He had probably the best season of his career before his injury. He was an all-star. I think a lot of people considered him to be an all-star candidate before that injury that kept him out for a little bit in that season. He was averaged over the course of the year 23 points per game, shooting 46% from the field. So he's down 4% right now, 40% from three. I also don't think CJ's slump is going to last too long, but his value is going to drop. There is always the possibility that he has played his best basketball, and you don't want to just ride this core out to the end, Dame and CJ, and not make a move. CJ is a guy that me and many other people think should have been traded a long time ago. The problem is, I don't even know what you trade CJ for at this point that helps you become a contender. If a superstar goes on the market, a team isn't going to look at the Trailblazers and go, sure, we'll trade you our superstar for CJ McCollum and first-round picks. They're not going to do that. The Trailblazers don't really have any young assets that can really entice a team. Anthony Simons is a fun young piece. Sure, Nasir Little. He's had some really good moments, especially defensively. I like his game on that end. But neither of those players are guys that people are going to look at and go, they can help be the cornerstone to our rebuild. That's just not the case. So CJ McCollum kind of projects as a guy that kind of helps the team make a lateral move. So maybe you look at like the 76ers with Ben Simmons. Maybe you bring in Ben Simmons. He can't really shoot, which doesn't help you. He's a playmaker, but you already have Dame as a playmaker. So it doesn't help that much, but he's a great defender. And that's what you really need. You need someone to be a good defender on this team because no one is. So you bring in a guy like Ben Simmons maybe. The problem is I don't see the Sixers making that move. That's been a move that a lot of people have telegraphed as being one that could maybe help both sides, but I really don't think it does. CJ, so far this season, has not been that much better than Seth Curry. And Seth Curry's making far less money, and he's someone that they don't have to move a major piece for. They've already got Seth Curry. Why do they need to bring in a guy like CJ McCollum? I'm not saying CJ is on the same tier. CJ is definitely better than Seth Curry, but they do very similar things for the Sixers team. You don't need to bring him in. They wouldn't be able to fit together, so you've got to move Seth to the bench, but he's been like your second best player so far this season, so you don't want to bench him. You cannot do a backcourt of them, especially not when you have Tyrese Maxey who's balling out. You can't put one of them at the 3 because then you're just dead defensively, so it just doesn't work. So the CJ McCollum trade doesn't make sense. So now where are you? Who do you move him for? What team is going to trade for CJ McCollum really? There is probably a team out there that can make you a lateral move, but no matter who you move, I don't see any players right now that are available on the trade market that you could move CJ for that wouldn't be restarting that wouldn't just lead to you still being mediocre or like in this okay tier of NBA teams. Norman Powell, maybe you could move him. But once again, I don't think there's anyone who's going to trade a major piece that makes this Trailblazers team a contender for Norman Powell. It's just not going to happen. There's a million better trade packages out there for teams that, if they have like an unhappy star or superstar, that they could get better than what the Trailblazers have to offer. And that's going to become more and more true as time goes on. What I'm saying is the Portland Trailblazers need to consider blowing this thing up. Maybe it doesn't happen this season. I think you can ride out this season. I think you can. But you need to consider it. If not this season, this upcoming offseason, there still is time in the season for them to turn things around. Maybe Dame snaps out of his slump. I couldn't think of the word. And the Trailblazers end up going on this crazy run. They end up being like a Western Conference Finals team. Sure, maybe that happens. Maybe I'm entirely wrong. I've been a curse, so this video could very well make the Blazers turn into a contender for all I know. But from what I've seen, the Trailblazers team is just not going anywhere. They're stuck. A lot of people have called them the Pacers of the West. I don't think that's fair. I think they're much better than the Pacers of the West because they have a superstar in Damian Lillard. They have this phenomenal player. The Pacers have a lot of solid players. The difference is the Trailblazers, they have Damian Lillard. He is someone that almost every NBA team would want on their team. So you got to make the hard decisions. Let me know what you think about the Portland Trailblazers below. I haven't talked about them that much because they're kind of just right now. Should they trade Dame? And if they should, who should they trade him to? If you don't think they should, let me know in the comment section below why I'm wrong as well. I am perfectly fine with you disagreeing with me. Make sure to leave a like and subscribe. Yeah, so I appreciate y'all watching. I'll see y'all later. Everyone.